Okay, hey folks, this is the daily Bible reading on August the 17th. August 17th of 2020 is a Monday. Here we go, Monday. So let's dive right in for the daily reading for our spiritual veggies. Thanks for joining me. Let's just hit it. Okay, August 17th, we're picking it up at Nehemiah 12, verse 27, dedication of the Jerusalem wall. So, Nehemiah 12, verse 27 starts, "For the dedication of the new wall of Jerusalem, the Levites throughout the land were asked to come to Jerusalem to assist in the ceremonies. They were to take part in the joyous occasion with their songs of thanksgiving." So, thanksgiving songs to the Lord, and with the music of cymbals, harps, lyres. I won't add instruments, but King David actually built instruments, made instruments for worship. So we use all kinds of instruments to worship the Lord. Verse 28, "The singers were brought together from the region around Jerusalem and from the villages of the Netophathites. They also came from Beth Gilgal and the rural areas near Geba and Azmaveth, for the singers had built their own settlements around Jerusalem. The priests and Levites first purified themselves, then they purified the people, the gates, and the wall." Verse 31, "I led the leaders of Judah to the top of the wall and organized two large choirs to give thanks. One of the choirs proceeded southward along the top of the wall to the dung gate." Imagine that, a procession. They're marching along the wall, giving songs of thanks to the Lord. Beautiful. One of the choirs proceeded, south along the dung gate, Hoshaiah, and half the leaders of Judah followed them, along with Azariah, Ezra, Meshullam, Judah, Benjamin, Shemaiah, and Jeremiah. Then came some priests who played trumpets, including Zechariah, son of Jonathan, son of Shemaiah, son of Mattaniah, son of Micaiah, son of Zakur, a descendant of Asaph. And Zechariah's colleagues were Shemaiah, Azarel, Melaleh, Gilaleh, Ma'eh, Nathanael, Judah, and Hanani. They used the musical instruments prescribed by David, the man of God. Ezra, the scribe, led this procession. At the fountain gate, they went straight up the steps on the ascent of the city and on the city wall toward the city of David. That's very significant. At the fountain gate, they went straight up the steps on the ascent of the city. I love that phrase, wall toward the city of David. They passed the house of David and then proceeded to the water gate on the east. The second choir, giving thanks, went northward around the other way to meet them. I followed them, together with the other half of the people, along the top of the wall, past the tower of the ovens to the broad wall, then past the Ephraim gate to the old city gate, past the fish gate and the tower of Hananel, and on to the tower of the 100. Then we continued on to the sheep gate and stopped at the guard gate. The two choirs that were giving thanks then proceeded to the temple of God, where they took their places. So did I, together with the group of leaders who were with me. We went together with the trumpet-playing priest, Elakim, Maaseiah. Boy, what a name. Maaseiah, Minamin, Micaiah, Eloinah, Zechariah, and Hananiah, and the singers, Maaseiah, Shemaiah, Eleazar, Uzai, Jehohanan, Melchijah, Elam, and Ezer. They played and sang loudly under the direction of Jezrahiah, the choir director. Look at there, a choir director, folks. Bless you, all you choir directors, music directors. Played and sang loudly, not timidly. They're singing and praising the Lord loudly. Love that. Many sacrifices were offered on that joyous day, for God had given the people cause for great joy. The women and children also participated in the celebration, and the joy of the people of Jerusalem could be heard far away. On that day, men were appointed to be in charge of the storerooms for the offerings, the first part of the harvest, and the tithes. They were responsible to collect from the fields outside the towns the portions required by the law for the priests and Levites. For all the people of Judah took joy in the priests and Levites and their work. They performed the service of their God and the service of purification as commanded by David and his son Solomon, and so did the singers and the gatekeepers. The custom of having choir directors to lead the choirs in hymns of praise and thanksgiving to God began long ago in the days of David, King David, and Asaph, who was the head musician or head singer in the temple. So now in the days of Zerubbabel and of Nehemiah, all Israel brought a daily supply of food for the singers, the gatekeepers, and the Levites. The Levites in turn gave a portion of what they received to the priest, the descendants of Aaron. Okay, for August 17th, we're going to proceed into chapter 13 up to verse 31. Oh, pardon me, and that will be the end of Nehemiah. How about that? So let's read that. Here we go, the last chapter of Nehemiah, chapter 13. On that same day, as the book of Moses was being read to the people, the passage was found that said no Ammonite or Moabite should ever be permitted to enter the assembly of God, for they had not provided the Israelites with food and water in the wilderness. Instead, they hired Balaam to curse them, though our God turned the cursing into a blessing. When this passage of the law was read, all those of foreign descent were immediately excluded from the assembly. How about that? Ooh, imagine that. Oh, they're so serious at this point. They're reading like, oh, sorry, friend, you have to leave this assembly. God has rejected that clan, and so right now there's no grace for that. Well, that was my grandfather. And this time, the clan is held responsible for. How about that? Wow. Okay. Before this had happened, Eliashib, the priest who had been appointed as supervisor of the storerooms of the temple of our God, and who was also a relative of Tobiah, had converted a large storage room and placed it at Tobiah's disposal. The room had previously been used for storing the grain offerings, the frankincense, various articles for the temple, and the tithes of grain, new wine, and olive oil, which were prescribed for the Levites, the singers, and the gatekeepers, as well as the offerings for the priest. I was not in Jerusalem at that time, for I had returned to King Artaxerxes of Babylon in the 32nd year of his reign, though I later asked his permission to return. When I arrived back in Jerusalem, I learned about Eliashib's evil deed in providing Tobiah with a room in the courtyards of the temple of God. I became very upset and threw all of Tobiah's belongings out of the room. Then I demanded that the rooms be purified. I brought back the articles for God's temple, the grain offerings, and the frankincense. I also discovered that the Levites had not been given their prescribed portion of food, so they and the singers who were to conduct the worship services had all returned to work their fields. I immediately confronted the leaders and demanded, "Why has the temple of God been neglected?" Then I called all the Levites back again and restored them to their proper duties. And once more all the people of Judah began bringing their tithes of grain, new wine, and olive oil to the temple storerooms. There you go. So the other tribes even originally were to take care of the Levites because what? The Levites were not given a portion. They didn't get a land or an area. Remember when God said, "No, I am their portion." Well, what he meant was, because you're serving in the temple, and this is for me, I will make provision from the rest of the nation for the sake of the tribe of Levites so they could minister to the Lord all the time. But when that got out of kilter, the Levites and the temple people, they just went out, they had to go work, they had to get jobs, right? That's what was happening there in the Old Covenant days. Verse 13, I assigned supervisors for the storerooms, Shelemiah the priest, Zadok the scribe, and Pedaiah, one of the Levites. And I appointed Hanan, son of Zakur, and grandson of Mattaniah, as their assistant. These men had an excellent reputation, and it was their job to make honest distributions to their fellow Levites. Remember this good deed, O my God, and do not forget all that I have faithfully done for the temple of my God and its services. In those days I saw men of Judah treading out their winepresses on the Sabbath. They were also bringing in grain and loading it on donkeys and bringing their wine, grapes, figs, and all sorts of produce into Jerusalem to sell on the Sabbath. Notice, now they're observing the law strictly and they can't do this. That's taboo. So I rebuked them for selling their produce on that day. Some men from Tyre who lived in Jerusalem were bringing in fish and all kinds of merchandise. They were selling it on the Sabbath to the people of Judah and in Jerusalem at that. So here's the man of God. At this time, they needed to observe the law that carefully. There wasn't grace for that. No, you can't do anything on the Sabbath. And to this day, Orthodox Jewish communities will honor this method of honoring this Sabbath. Now, we rest on the Sabbath, or can rest, or now people say, well, does it matter if it's Saturday, Sunday? Well, in the letter of the law, it is sundown Friday evening till sundown Saturday. That is the true Sabbath, what they consider the full seventh day, right? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that evening into the next evening. All right, so, and we should have a day in the week to rest to honor the Lord. I believe in the rest. The Sabbath officially would be that. But Jesus now has become our rest. In other words, the fullness of our peace, our rest. And this is why it's odd, because Jesus, even as a rabbi and a teacher, he broke the strict rulings of the Sabbath. And that frustrated the Pharisees in his day. But he's the Son of God. It's his Sabbath. And the rest we enter into is our rest with God through Jesus Christ. So whether we rest on the Sabbath, on the Saturday, I honor my Seventh-day Adventist friends, you can do that, or a Sunday rest or a Monday rest, but really every day we should be at peace with the Lord. We're resting in the Lord. But I also believe it's good for man not to work, to give your work a rest, at least one day of the week, to honor the Lord. All right, won't debate that. It's not a place of contention or where the churches should be divided. If you want to observe Saturday, observe Saturday. If you're observing Sunday, great. If you're doing it to honor the Lord, like Paul would say, that's the key. Okay, I'll let that go at that. So, but Nehemiah is having a fit. You can't do that. At this time, you should not do it. So I confronted the nobles of Judah at verse 17. He says, why are you profaning the Sabbath in this evil way? I asked, wasn't it just this sort of thing that your ancestors did that caused our God to bring all this trouble upon us in our city? Now you are bringing even more wrath upon Israel by permitting the Sabbath to be desecrated in this way. Then I commanded that the gates of Jerusalem should be shut as darkness fell every Friday evening, not to be opened until the Sabbath ended. I sent some of my own servants to guard the gates so that no merchandise could be brought in on the Sabbath day. So all businesses had to shut down. The merchants and tradesmen with a variety of wares camped outside Jerusalem once or twice, but I spoke sharply to them and said, what are you doing out here camping around the wall? If you do this again, I will arrest you. Wow. That's how strict it was in their day. It became legal, structure. And that was the last time they came on the Sabbath. Then I commanded the Levites to purify themselves to guard the gates in order to preserve the holiness of the Sabbath. Remember this good deed also, O God. Have compassion on me according to your great and unfailing love. About that same time, I realized that some of the men of Judah had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. Furthermore, half of their children spoke the language of Ashdod or some other people and could not speak the language of Judah at all. So I confronted them and called down curses on them. I beat some of them and pulled out their hair. I made them swear in the name of God that they would not let their children intermarry with the pagan people of the land. Wow! Wasn't this exactly what led King Solomon of Israel into sin? Yes. In that time, they didn't have the fortitude to follow God without following the strict rules, and Solomon himself failed it, right? Wow. I demanded there was no king from any nation that could compare to him, and God loved him and made him king over all Israel. But even he was led into sin by his foreign wives. How could you even think of committing this sinful deed and acting unfaithfully toward God by marrying foreign women? Wow. Now pause just so you're not getting in the wrong mindset. This doesn't mean now nationalities can't intermarry. For them in this time, though, it was so serious because it was always associated with worship and with whether they could honor God. So it's not a cultural thing, a black and white, red and yellow, black and white. We're all precious in His sight. But it's about God. If we're marrying someone, I recommend, even as a pastor, I don't recommend believers marry unbelievers. I don't even recommend believers who believe strongly different about doctrinal things not to marry that person. There will be conflict. And especially for a believer to marry a non-believer. The new covenant model is that you should not be unequally yoked in your life with somebody who doesn't believe. It will pull on you. Solomon got pulled away from the Lord by unbelieving spouses. That's how heavy it is. Does it seem harsh? Yeah, I guess, yeah, it does. But I think it's healthy for a believer to be mindful of that. If you're serious about God at all and love the Lord, don't bind yourself in covenant with an unbeliever. I'm not saying it brings, judgment. God hates you. God loves you. You're still a believer. But it will pull on your spiritual walk. It will. I've never seen it fail. Okay? In some fashion. All right. So here he is saying this. And he's saying, I'm going to call curses down on them. I beat them, pull out their hair and all that. Gosh, don't let your children intermarry. Wasn't that what King Solomon did? He says that by marrying foreign women. So verse 28. So one of the sons of Joiada, son of Eliashib, the high priest, had married a daughter of Sanballat, the Horonite. So I banished him from my presence. Wow. Remember them, O my God, for they have defiled the priesthood and solemn vows of the priest and the Levites. So I purged out everything foreign and assigned tasks to the priest and Levites, making certain that each knew his work. I also made sure that the supply of wood for the altar and the first portions of the harvest were brought at the proper times. Remember this in my favor, O my God. So that's the end of the book of Nehemiah, and I'll let it stand there. Remember, folks, we are in a different covenant now. But there are certain principles that are still true to the ways of human beings. And we have to weigh that carefully spiritually, not in condemnation, but knowing how it will affect our walk with the Lord. All right, August 17th, the reading for Psalms is Psalm 35, verses 1 through 16. King David here. Theme: a prayer to God for help against those who try to inflict injury for no reason. When our enemies are unjust and lie about us, even when we do good to them, we can appeal to God, who is always just. David possibly had written this when he was being hunted by King Saul in 1 Samuel 24. Psalm 35. O Lord, oppose those who oppose me. Fight those who fight against me. Put on your armor and take up your shield. Prepare for battle and come to my aid. Lift up your spear and your javelin against those who pursue me. Let me hear you say, I will give you victory. Bring shame and disgrace on those trying to kill me. Turn them back and humiliate those who want to harm me. Blow them away like chaff in the wind, a wind sent by the angel of the Lord. Make their path dark and slippery with the angel of the Lord pursuing them. I did them no wrong, but they laid a trap for me. I did them no wrong, but they dug a pit to catch me. So let sudden ruin come upon them. Let them be caught in the trap they set for me. Let them be destroyed in the pit they dug for me. Then I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be glad because he rescues me. With every bone in my body I will praise him. Lord, who can compare with you? Who else rescues the helpless from the strong? Who else protects the helpless and poor from those who rob them? Yes, Lord. So for August 17th, we're going to pause. Oh, wait, we will get up to verse 16 here. Sorry. Let's move on, see what else he's saying. Verse 11. Malicious witnesses testify against me. They accuse me of crimes I know nothing about. They repay me evil for good. I am sick with despair. Yet when they were ill, I grieved for them. I denied myself by fasting for them, but my prayers returned unanswered. I was sad as though they were my friends or family, as if I were grieving for my own mother. But they are glad now that I am in trouble. They gleefully join together against me. I am attacked by the people I don't even know. They slander me constantly. They mock me and call me names. They snarl at me. Wow. King David again crying out to God. All right, August 17th, The proverb today is Proverbs 21, verses 17 through 18, 17 and 18. Here we go, Proverbs 21, 17, 18. Those who love pleasure become poor. Those who love wine and luxury will never be rich. The wicked are punished in place of the godly, and traitors in place of the honest. So we have to remember, let me notice here, if you look down, I'm going to make a point here, because doesn't mean you can't have things. It just says those who love pleasure or only love pleasure, they become poor. Those who love wine, that's where they're God, wine and luxury and wealth and all that, it'll wear you out and you're never really rich. Because if you look down here at verse 20, it says the wise have wealth and luxury, but fools spend whatever they get. So you have to read, when I see that, like, Lord, really? Well, should we be poor and, just kind of like, never have fun, don't do anything pleasurable? No, it's not saying that. When you see things like that, you're like, Lord, wait a minute, what else? So sometimes when I see that, I always read on. So if you only love pleasure, you can become poor. Those who love wine and luxury and that's it will never really be rich. The wicked are punished in place of the godly, and traitors in place of the honest. All right, so read those in context. I even kind of studied, I have a question mark, it's more than this, and when I found verse 20 and 19 and so on, it's like, okay, there's a bigger picture going on in Proverbs there. All right, August 17th, let's move on to New Covenant reading, 1 Corinthians 11, 1 through 16. Paul, 1 Corinthians 11, I'm so glad that you always keep me in your thoughts and that you are following the teachings I passed on to you. But there's one thing I want you to know. The head of every man is Christ. The head of every woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. A man dishonors his head if he covers his head while praying or prophesying, but a woman dishonors her head if she prays or prophesies without covering on her head. For this is the same as shaving her head. Yet if she refuses to wear a head covering, she should cut off all her hair. But since it is shameful for a woman to have her hair cut or her head shaved, she should wear a covering. Okay, pause. The church has struggled with this through the years. Now, sometimes when we see a strong cultural statement, it is not a moral law. Paul, and I'm not going to unpack all that here. I just won't unpack that. You have to just realize, it dealt with cultural. So sometimes we read this because people will argue, well, see there, Carl, no, you have to use wisdom and discernment. Like, no, that doesn't make sense. Those aren't spiritual conditions, right? So be aware that sometimes we read this and go, Paul, what are you doing? He's dealing with the culture of the day. All right, moving on. We're going to get all the way through 11, verse 16. Yes, but it's shameful for a woman to have her hair cut or have her head shaved, so she should wear a covering. Man should not wear anything on his head when worshiping, for a man is made in God's image and reflects God's glory. A woman reflects man's glory. Okay, folks, both men and women reflect God's glory. Now in Christ, there's neither male nor female, Jew nor we don't get stuck in that. Wow. All right. And a woman reflects man's glory. For the first man didn't come from a woman, but the first woman came from man. The man was not made for a woman, but woman was made for man. For this reason, and because the angels are watching, a woman should wear a covering on her head to show she is under authority. Okay, for that culture, they did that. But among the Lord's people, women are not independent of men, and men are not independent of women. For although the first woman came from man, every other man was born from a woman. And everything comes from God. Judge for yourselves. Is it right for a woman to pray to God in public without covering her head? Isn't it obvious that it's disgraceful for a man to have long hair? And isn't long hair a woman's pride and joy? For it has been given to her as a covering. But if anyone wants to argue about this, I simply say that we have no other custom than this, and neither do God's other churches. So it was it was a custom. It wasn't a law of God, but we will let it go at that. That's what the daily reading. up to 1 Corinthians 11:16. Something to weigh. You can read commentaries on that, and there are still churches that observe that and cultures that do, and that's fine. It's not a right or wrong thing. It's just we have to remember it's not a salvation thing. Very important. All right, bless you all. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow for another daily Bible reading. Bye-bye.